Adam, so here we are again. Now, over the guns that we've been looking at, from the very first ones, the muskets, you could tell that they came from a different era. But now we're looking at a rifle here that is appreciably more modern and something that I think that many people would recognise the shape of straight away. Can you tell me the importance of this rifle and which one we're talking about?
Absolutely, Simon. So what we've got in front of us is essentially there are two versions of the same weapon. This is the SMLE, short magazine Lee Enfield. Otherwise officially known as the LeeEnfield #1 Mark III. And this was the weapon that actually took the UK into the 20th century. It is essentially taking the action we saw on the Lee Metford, so this is a Lee action, combining it with more modern features, and most notably you'll see in the title, SMLE, short magazine Lee Enfield. So the short doesn't pertain to the fact of the magazine, it pertains to the length. We've now got a shorter rifle.
Right.
Okay, so we're now doing what most European countries were doing at this time, was taking their sort of 19th century ideas of longer weapon systems and bringing them down. They really just didn't need that length with the calibers they had and the distances they were engaged in.
Right, okay. Now, having a shorter weapon like this, did that just improve overall sort of handling and the ability to load it and stuff as well? Is it just a more convenient thing to carry into war?
Absolutely. You know, even with its shortened length, though, this was the weapon that UK troops would be taking into the Western Front. And you can imagine, with its pattern 1907 bayonet fitted to the front, this rifle is still quite an ungainly beast to be trying to negotiate around the trenches.
We've got two models here. Could you just explain the difference between the two?
Absolutely. So this is your standard SMLE, okay? It's got the 10-round detachable box magazine fed by 5-round stripper clips. And this is just an extended magazine version, which was available for the life of the rifle, but tended not to be used that often. These were seen to be used in the trenches of the Western Front, but due to the fact that it extended so far down from the base of the breech, used to clog up with mud and dust and dirt. So tended to stick with these. But it's just a nice version. And actually, there were so many variations of this weapon system. I mean, here, for argument's sake, we've now got the rifle grenade version of this. You'll see the copper barrel bands to keep it together,
right,
and this rather hefty launcher on the front.
Wow, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
But a lot of modifications were made to these to adapt to things like rifle grenades. Wire cutters were mounted to the front to help with barbed wires. Sort of obstacles.
And of course we have the ever-present bayonet at the end here as well.
That's a 1907 pattern bayonet, standard going into the First World War. Bayonet designs would, at the start of the 20th century, really see that lengthen. By the end of the Great War and into the 1920s, these things were starting to get shorter. So by the time we get to the Second World War, this weapon system, so these bayonets were considerably shorter.
And how many or how long did this really stay in production for, do you know?
It's phenomenal. This version itself actually was stopped being used by the British as of 1939 as their frontline rifle.
Wow.
Replaced with a #4. However, this went on into production all over the Commonwealth, and actually there's countries in the world that still use this either as a marksman rifle or in rear echelon use. The Canadian Mountain Troops Special Unit in Canada were using these up until incredibly recently as their primary weapon.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's interesting as well that during the Second World War, production of these continued in the Commonwealth. So countries like Australia would make these under license, India, Canada, whereas the UK adopted the weapon system we'll talk about next. The rest of this weapon was so reliable and so well loved, there was no need to change it.
And in as much as obviously a rifle is only as good as the person who's wielding it, what kind of advantages did this have in terms of accuracy over its predecessors? I mean, what really goes into a rifle that would determine, you know, its ease of use and its accuracy on the battlefield?
So one of the biggest leaps from going from the black powder cartridge of the Lee Metford into the Lee Enfields we see here is primarily the change of cartridge. So you remember we went from a bottlenose or dum-dum 303 black powder cartridge.
Right.
and we now go to what a lot of armies in Europe at the time were doing, was adopting the Spitzer style.
Right.
So this was had a sort of nitrocellulose, cordite based propellant, and obviously clearly a very different bullet at the time, which gave a much greater penetration and range.
Yeah, it's a nasty looking thing, that, isn't it?
So much so these were sighted out to, and you'll see on the dials here, if I can just move that up there, Lee sights up to 2,000 yards. So
wow.
Not that you better see to 2,000 yards,
sure.
but absolutely this thing had the range and the stopping power to do that.
Wow. Could we see the mechanism in action?
Yeah, sure. Just it's a very smooth. So what we have with the SMLEs is the perfection of the Lee mechanism, and it's this weapon, over 100 years old, just a really smooth action.
I can hear the excitement in your voice still.
Yeah.
Click. So Adam, could you tell me a little bit more about how this gun may have changed the tactics on the battlefield?
So, as we see from the developments from the UK getting its first repeater rifle in the Lee method, the Lee Enfield SMLE should really be seen as the son of that weapon, and it's a refinement of that, but also the smoothness of the action and the skill of the training being given to British troops meant this weapon system could deliver incredibly rapid, for a bolt action rifle, and accurate fire. And we'll talk about some stories in the next episode with the number 4, but absolutely considered one of the finest bolt action rifles ever designed, purely for its smoothness of bolt.
Sure.
Compared to other armies at the time. Now, there was some discussion, some research done in the start of the 20th century, because sort of earlier versions of this were used during the Second World War, as sort of a version of the MLE or SMLE were used, and they wanted to change the cartridge actually, and try and adopt a new cartridge, because they found that it wasn't necessarily performing at the greater distances that the Boers were using with their German Mausers, and some R&D went into producing the pattern 1913 and pattern 1914. These rifles did actually go into widespread production, and the venerable 303 cartridge remained, and it basically became an icon and a legend.
And do you think this might have been sort of studied at and looked at with envious eyes from sort of troops on the other side? Do you think that it may have been lifted the design somewhat, or kind of set the precedent of what was to come?
So because this was going up against some fantastic rifles, and I cite the German Mauser as being one of the finest ever produced, but I think it went more down to the training we gave our soldiers, their ability to understand this weapon system and use it to devastating effect.
Right.
Was the thing that really took it to the next level.
So it's fair to say that this now becomes a proper extension of the soldier itself, rather than just being a clumsy appliance that they might be able to hit somebody with.
Absolutely.
Sure.
This is by far and away now becoming an incredibly accurate, deadly weapon, which is, like you say, an extension of the soldier.
Wow. Okay.